The spate of recent violent attacks in Europe has left many of us reeling in shock. But while our hearts go out to the victims of these attacks, we must engage our minds to actually try and understand why they happened and also see how we can better prevent them from happening in future. Now, whatever the exact nature of the connection between the attackers and the ISIS group is, this declaration makes them very clearly acts of political violence, and so we need to address the politics behind them. Some people have claimed that we should see these attacks also as the work of insane, psychologically unstable or mentally ill individuals. However, this is not helpful in understanding the politics behind them, as this so-called psychopathologization of violence, as Andrew Silke and Martha Crenshaw amongst others have called it, it depoliticizes the act itself, and it prevents us from understanding it as political. So I think we need to go beyond that in our understanding of actually then focusing on the politics rather than the violence involved. There's a consensus amongst scholars of terrorism that in order to address political violence, we need to address the preconditions that allow it to take place. This means addressing the psychosocial or material grievances that people have. It means addressing the concerns of potentially marginalised communities from which extremists or those undergoing radicalisation are drawn. Actually addressing these concerns can help us to win this crucial battle for hearts and minds, which we know from experience of dealing with terrorist groups such as ETA and the IRA, or also in dealing with counterinsurgency warfare, to be the best way of actually separating those who might commit such violence from the communities they falsely claim to represent. What it can mean in practice is denying them the shelter that they might get from certain groups, denying them the sympathy that they will get from certain parts of the community. It can mean providing the kind of information to police that can not only stop the attack, but also the kind of information to social services that can help them prevent radicalisation processes before they actually happen. This is a much more effective way to deal with what are extremely difficult issues than any kind of retrospective police or military action. It's therefore concerning that the response of the French state to the Nice attack, for example, was to extend, or in fact reintroduce and extend the state of emergency that it had introduced after previous terrorist attacks. This removes certain democratic safeguards from policing and essentially tries to provide policing on the cheap rather than investing in the kind of integration policies and also in the type of community policing work that would really help to address the grievances of particularly Muslim communities in France, but could also help to exactly separate the radicals from the others. The militarisation of policing that's also been seen to happen, putting the military on the streets and so on, is a very ineffective and cosmetic security measure that will only make us feel less safe while actually not making us more safe at all. We can also ask, though, what can liberal democracies do in this instance? Because this state of emergency in France has allowed a major international football tournament to take place. We've seen crowds of hundreds of thousands gathering to celebrate Bastille Day as before the tragic attack in Nice. This is in marked contrast to the kind of state of emergency that Turkish President Erdogan introduced in response to the failed coup attempt. That involved a broad and wide-ranging crackdown of highly oppressive nature. Now, we shouldn't be thinking about such measures if we want to maintain a liberal democratic society, but nor should we be thinking about the kind of responses that are often proposed by the European far right, who are trying to hijack these attacks for their own political agenda, be that anti-migrant, anti-refugee, or indeed anti-Muslim as such. The way they would see to make our societies more homogenous would not necessarily make us more safe. Instead, we need to actually engage with people's concerns and indeed engage this politics behind the violence rather than simply imposing our own frames of meaning on it. However, it's also important in these difficult times to keep a sense of proportion. However horrific these attacks are, we're very unlikely actually to be involved in them. They're still remarkably rare, and we are far more likely to die, for example, in a road traffic accident or in a domestic accident than we would be at the hands of terrorists. So if we keep a sense of proportion and we actually address the causes rather than reacting badly to the symptoms of this violence, we stand a good chance of being able to address it and also to address some of the other problems in our societies at the same time.